Whoa, living darkness. I'm sorry, I had to get that out of my system. I have been thinking of that music ever since I heard the title of this release. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and if there's one range I've been persistently rooting for the past couple of years from Big Finish, it has been the First Doctor Adventures. You've had numerous iterations of the First Doctor Adventures. You've had all the Companion Chronicles, you had Peter Purves playing the First Doctor, you even had a few seasons with David Bradley reprising his role as William Hartnell in the First Doctor from the TV series, and this new iteration has Stephen Noonan and Lauren Cornelius playing the First Doctor and Dodo respectively, and this is Volume 4 of that set. However, the trajectory of the First Doctor Adventures has been pretty interesting. Now, the Outlaws and the Demon Song, you get these 4 stories in these 2 box sets, which seem like almost like return to form to 1965-1966 Doctor Who. However, the last 2 box sets, Fugitive of the Daleks and this one, The Living Darkness, essentially sideline Dodo in order to put a returning companion actor and character front and centre. In The Fugitive of the Daleks, you had Maureen O'Brien, who played Vicky in the classic series, reprising her role as an older Vicky who reunites with the First Doctor, and now in Living Darkness, we have essentially a similar deal with Peter Purves playing Stephen Taylor, who we last saw in the TV series being left behind on the planet of the Savages in order to reform that civilization. And if you don't know about Stephen Taylor, if you don't even know what a dodo is, then I'm going to level with you. I'm not sure if The Living Darkness is for you. Kind of similar to Fugitive of the Daleks, which acted as a pseudo-sequel to, of all stories, The Chase, as well as a prequel to The Massacre. You're just going to have to listen to the story and figure out how on earth that happens. And with The Living Darkness, we have a sequel to The Savages, as well as a Companion Chronicles Big Finish story written in 2014 called The War to End All Wars, which basically summed up what Stephen had been up to post The Savages, and this acts as a pseudo-sequel to that, and also in this story, it's a sequel to The Daleks' Master Plan. Now, if you don't know anything about those stories, I'm not sure if I can wholeheartedly recommend The Living Darkness. However, as somebody who thankfully did a Hartnell review marathon and is quite well acquainted with those stories, I can safely say that I had a really good time with The Living Darkness, but let me back up. So The Living Darkness is a 6-parter written by Jacqueline Rayner, and it starts with Stephen and a bunch of other citizens of the solar system just waking up on a spaceship having no idea of how they got there, with the exception of them being enveloped in this moving darkness with these like insect tendril leg noises as they were being taken away. In Stephen's prison cell, you've got Quiz, played by Jack Ayres, you've got Ava, played by Dido Miles, and Umbriel, played by Laura Rollins. The latter two had a lengthy stint on Doctors, and they just go right back to argumentative banter once again. However, it's not long until they discover that a fellow prisoner on the spaceship with them is the First Doctor, played by Stephen Noonan. There's a lovely reunion between an older Stephen, who's now over 100 years old, and the First Doctor still calling him young man, which is a very funny bit. It's up to the Doctor and Stephen to figure out where they are, how they got there, what are the Hadria, which are these insect creatures on the cover, where has Dodo gone, and can they possibly escape from their maybe not so benevolent alien overlords. Oh, and there's also a dog in the story as well, but the name written on the tag on the collar is so complicated and hard to pronounce that they just call the dog Dog.
Doctor, look at me. Really look at me. Oh, come on, you're a time traveler. This must happen to you all the time, meeting people across the years.
Goodness me, no. I never look back, never. On the contrary, there are always new places to see, new people to meet. Upon my soul. Stephen. Stephen, my boy! Oh, how wonderful to see you again.
And you, Doctor, and you.
Yes, indeed. But now you must explain. Why did you bring me here and then lock me up in this room?
I didn't. The same thing happened to me. I mean, one moment I was at home, the next I was here, on this ship. Is that what happened to you and... Hold on a minute. Where's Dodo? Or something happened to her?
Oh, yes, Dodo. Oh, she's safe in the ship.
Oh, well, that's a relief. At least if we've got the TARDIS, we've got a way out of here. Although I'm guessing you haven't worked out how to steer it yet.
Ah, yes, the TARDIS. Well, rather unfortunately, I do not, in fact, have it with me.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I was whisked away. It was entirely out of my control.
I'm going to start with the negatives of The Living Darkness first, with the exception of the fact that I think it's a pretty inaccessible story if you don't know about the Daleks' master plan, if you don't know about the Savages, if you don't have a passing familiarity with a post-Savages Stephen, and also if you don't know what happens in The War Machines regarding Dodo, but that's all I'll say about that particular reference. If I'm saying all these references and all these names to you and you don't know what on earth I'm talking about, then I think that The Living Darkness might be not a very accessible listen. But the other issue with The Living Darkness is that it's a 6-part story, and my issue with it isn't necessarily its length, because, you know, there are plenty classic Doctor Who serials that are 6 parts that I do think justify that length. For example, Power of the Daleks, that's my go-to example. No, the issue is not so much the length, the issue is so much the structure. I think parts 1 and 2, where it's this like mystery prison break thriller, is really interesting. However, the plot blurb on the back of the CD and on the Big Finish website is a bit misleading. You know, can Stephen truly trust the new arrival of this place claiming to be the Doctor? That never really happens. The Doctor and Stephen, once they reunite, it's pretty instantaneous, their reconnection with each other. I don't know, maybe there was a missed opportunity there. But yeah, parts 1 and 2 are this really interesting mystery as they try and figure out where they are, and we get to learn about these new characters, like I said, Quiz, Umbriel, and Arva. And parts 5 and 6, I think, are full of really strong character-driven moments as they try and escape this prison planet that they land on. And then they land on another planet, a volcano world, like I said, Daleks' Master Plan sequel. There's some really effective character moments as all of these plot beats and character arcs culminate together in the finale. The problem is that middle portion, parts 3 and 4, and there's, like I said, there's some really strong character moment there. There's a really brilliant monologue from Arva talking about Stephen and about grief and loss. You know, the living darkness are the friends and family we lost along the way. That's just me being a bit glib and pretentious, just to clarify. But there's this really beautiful monologue when Arva is talking about her late wife and the messages that she would leave behind, seemingly from beyond the grave. These little post-its that, you know, they would leave each other while they were still in a relationship, and she's still finding these little messages. Really lovely character beat. But the problem, like I said, is the structure. Parts 3 and 4, it really feels like the characters are searching around trying to find the plot. The time spent is mostly worthwhile in a character sense, but it feels like the story and the pace and the momentum is just ground to a halt, and that can make it a little bit of a tough middle chapter. But thankfully, like I said, the character work is really strong, and there to emphasize that character work that Jacqueline Rayner has done are just a cast of brilliant actors, with Peter Purves leading the charge. He showed up here. He gives a really strong and effective dramatic performance, and there's a lot of like real hidden depths and grief to this character who has lost their youngest daughter. If you've listened to the Companion Chronicles, The War to End All Wars, you know what happened to Stephen's daughter, and that grief coming to the surface because they're on this spaceship and the computer is talking to them in the voices of people who are meant to like relax them and make them feel better. But in Stephen's case, it's the voice of his late young daughter who he named Dodo, and it sort of forces him to confront this grief that I don't even think he really knew he was still grappling with all of these years later. It's some really effective stuff, and Peter Purves absolutely sells it. Stephen Noonan is completely terrific. I love his mannerisms. I think it's a real pitch perfect First Doctor impression when it comes to embodying the character. You can really like hear him in the recording booth, you know, hands on the lapels, and like the potentially like the deliberate flubs that he does, and how like even the Doctor is kind of sensing when he flubs his lines and he gets annoyed at the other actors, like in a really funny way. I really appreciate little like off the cuff moments like that, if they are indeed not scripted, but they could be. And the scenes with Peter Purves and Stephen Noonan playing off each other are really wonderful. It's really great to hear how, you know, very much like Vicky, Maureen O'Brien's character in Fugitive of the Daleks, these are not companions who were left behind by the Doctor and they've remained static all these years. You really get the sense that they've had decades of time without the Doctor, they've changed, they've really grown, and they really have, it's given them a new appreciation of the time that they did once spend with the Doctor. And in Stephen's case, there's a wonderful exchange in part 6 where they actually like reconcile after that argument they had at the end of the massacre. And it was a really wonderful moment because, you know, if you've not seen the story, then Living Darkness probably isn't for you, unfortunately, which is a shame. But at the end of the massacre, after everything that the Doctor has done over the course of that story and everything Stephen has been through, he's like, I'm leaving. I can't be around you. I don't agree with your philosophy and your approach on life. And he leaves for like 2-3 minutes. And it's never really dealt with in the actual TV series proper. But here it does get some sort of resolution. And that's really lovely to see. There's also a really interesting resolution in regards to a plot strand from the War Machines, and it makes me wonder, this is going to have a really fun implication for one character's personal history, which is, it's interesting and fun. I'm really curious if they are going to try and build on that in future Big Finish stories, or if they are just going to be like, okay, this is the alteration we've made to the canon. Let's just let that one lie. I don't know. I'm interested to see what they do moving forward, even if it is nothing, because that's still interesting, I think. Very much like Fugitive of the Daleks, Dodo, played by Lauren Cornelius, is sidelined in this story. She has a pretty minimal appearance, which I do think is a bit of a shame, because I think that Lauren Cornelius is so good in this role. I think that the limited interactions that she does get in this story are really strong. I adored her reaction to seeing Stephen. I adored that completely. It was so oddly human and relatable. Like, I was kind of caught off guard by just how intimate a character beat it was, and just how like relatable and how interesting it was. I thought it was really fascinating. However, Big Finish spends 3 days recording 6-parters like this. Lauren Cornelius, I think, was only there for 1 day. It's a very limited like imprint on the story, unfortunately. I do have a few other nitpicks. Some of the cliffhangers are pretty baffling. Like, some of them are really good. Like, I really love the cliffhanger to part 1. I love the cliffhanger as well to part 5 going into part 6. Like, that cliffhanger going from 5 to 6, I saw coming from a mile away, and I imagine you're meant to see it coming, but it's still devastating to hear it actually happen. And like I said, Peter Purves is so good dramatically here. No, but the part 3 to part 4 cliffhanger is pretty silly, but the part 4 to part 5 cliffhanger is so silly and so weak, I don't even think 1960s classic Doctor Who would have even tried to have attempted it. Like, it's such a nothing cliffhanger, and I understand, like, I imagine that most people who listen to Big Finish do so in the same way to me, where they just listen to it in big chunks. They don't wait an entire week until you listen to the next one. Yeah, if you do that, that's cool. But if you do take that latter approach, you're going to hate some of the cliffhangers in this story. However, what I got from The Living Darkness is that it clearly comes from a place of real love and respect for these characters. Whether it be from Mark Wright, who is the producer of this range, and Jacqueline Rayner, who wrote this particular one, there's a real care and consideration in how these characters interact with each other, and how Stephen and the Doctor and Dodo, how they work as a unit. And you clearly have to have a great amount of love and respect for this era of the show if you are going to try and make sequels to The Chase, if you're going to try and make sequels to The Savages and the Daleks Master Plan. The latter one, the Daleks Master Plan, though, I'm a little bit mixed on that one, because it seems to try and consider the Space Security Service from the classic series of Doctor Who as almost like a good organization, where like it was meant to be a solar system version of the military-industrial complex. I don't understand this like strange rehabilitation that this story is trying to give to that organization. I don't know. But still, it's done out of love. I think that Peter Purves as a leading man in this story, because yeah, it's the first Doctor adventure. Stephen Noonan gets top billing here, but no, Peter Purves is the leading man in this box set, and he does a brilliant job in that role. I'm really interested in where the range goes next, because there's still like a bit of a loose end as to where the Doctor and Dodo even really are after the events of the Injutant incident. That came out in 2023, so yeah, this has been quite a long story. Like, these are annual releases. It's got to be Carol Ann Ford, right, for the next one? Like, if we are doing this memory lane journey, first Maureen O'Brien, then Peter Purves, it's got to be Carol Ann Ford, right? I understand the temptation from Mark Wright and those at Big Finish to want to tell these long gestating sequels with the original actors like Maureen O'Brien, like Peter Purves, possibly Carol Ann Ford if that is the next story, I don't know. Tell these stories with the new First Doctor and the new Dodo while these actors are still here, but at some point I do want to hear what a First Doctor and Dodo new range, what that's like. I do want to know what a First Doctor and possibly new companions, what that could possibly be like. But currently we're in this farewell tour, this memory lane, like part of the First Doctor range. But thankfully, if we are telling these stories, if we are doing these trips down memory lane, these sequels, these fan service moments, and this casting of Maureen O'Brien and Peter Purves, I am glad that it is giving these characters their dues, that it is giving these actors genuinely great like material to sink their teeth into and show off their real dramatic chops. Like, you know, these were actors in the 1960s Doctor Who, you know, for a family show, but they're still great actors, and they are displaying that in these stories, and I think that's great. Basically, if you know what Mavic Chen is, if you know where Desperus is, if you say Votan instead of Wotan, then I can recommend The Living Darkness wholeheartedly. If not, these stories aren't for you yet. I'm going to put that big asterisk on The Living Darkness and Fugitive of the Daleks for now. But for me, as someone who has thankfully done a Hartnell marathon very recently, I really, really liked The Living Darkness. I thought the character work was really strong. The structure in the middle was very little structure, but it starts strong and it ends really brilliantly. We currently don't know what the next range in the First Doctor Adventures is, presumably early 2026, and I'm hedging my bets. Carol Ann Ford, I'm assuming that's happening, but whatever it is, I'm excited to hear it. Thank you so much for watching my review of Doctor Who, The First Doctor Adventures at The Living Darkness. I hope you folks enjoyed it. Let me know if you've been listening to the First Doctor range, whether it be Stephen Noonan or David Bradley, or even Peter Purvis, who does a really good William Hartnell impression. Let me know in the comment section down below. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews, and I'll see you all next time.